Hello, my name is James Nagy. Thank you for watching my video series, The End of the End Times. This is part 5 of my presentation, which is a 10-part series based upon my book, also titled The End of the End Times. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at the events of ancient Israel that occurred during the time of the Greek Empire. Now, this lesson is going to be a little bit more challenging because, unlike the Assyrian, Babylonian, and Persian empires, we don't have a lot in the Old Testament written about the Greek Empire, the nation of Greece, until really we get to the book of Daniel. And so in order to properly understand the Bible prophecies in the book of Daniel, we really need to do a deep dive into the origins of the Greek Empire. And we're going to look at, for example, how the Greek Empire replaced the Persian Empire. And so there's a lot of information here that we're going to take a look at before we actually get into some of the Old Testament Bible prophecies, especially in the book of Daniel. So let's talk about the Greek Empire. So recall that in the book of Daniel, in chapter 7, we have an image or a vision of 4 beasts. And now we get to our third beast that's mentioned, and this is from Daniel 7:6, and I'm going to read it to you. After this I looked, and behold, another like a leopard, with 4 wings of a bird on its back. And the beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. All right, so this is a description of the Greek Empire, at least the way that Daniel saw it in his vision. So, like I said, there's a little bit of history that we need to cover first before we can actually start looking at some of the Bible prophecies. So we're going to start out talking about a period in ancient history called the Greek Classical Age. So the Greek Classical Age began in 500 BC and ended in 323 BC with the death of Alexander the Great. During this time, during the Greek Classical Age, Greek principles included family life, a strong sense of civic duty, economics, involvement in government, and of course religion. The ancient Greeks began calling themselves Hellenes around 1000 BC. And they formed city-states that were said to be Hellenistic or Greek-like. So in other words, these were city-states that shared Greek ideas and principles. Greek life was centered around the polis, or the city-states. Now these were autonomous political units that remained fiercely independent. So some of the city-states you would recognize, like Athens and Sparta. Thebes was also another one. We're going to be talking about all 3 of these shortly. Hellenism, or the idea of this Greek culture, spread politically and through trading. By the 5th century BC, there were many polis all over the Mediterranean Sea and Black Sea. Religion was an important aspect to ancient Greek life, and like the Assyrians before them, the Greeks believed that they were patron gods that guarded or protected their cities. And in this picture here, on the left, you see the Parthenon, which was a temple devoted to the Greek goddess Athena. Now, Athens was responsible for shifting Greek culture around 500 BC. So Athens was one of the 2 or 3 top principal polis or city-states that existed in the ancient nation of Greece. So there started to be this cultural shift around 500 BC that centered in the city of Athens, and it was there that they instituted the first form of democracy that the world had ever known. At the time, the mastery of rhetoric became the highest goal that one could attain, and social changes could be implemented through the ability to persuade others through argumentation. So this was considered a higher gift or achievement that somebody could attain, and rather than trying to impose forcibly ideas on other people, although this did sometimes happen in the Greek nation, but it was preferable to try to implement social changes or revolution through rhetoric, or the ability to persuade others of your ideas through argumentation. Now on the right we have a picture of a man named Cleisthenes, and he restructured civil life in a way that provided for the following reforms. This is during the Greek Classical Age. So he was pushing for greater representation and participation in government for all people regardless of their class, and also rights for women such as land ownership and inheritance. Now we're going to talk about Athens and Persia. So this is where Persia starts to come into the picture. So if you look at the map here, we have the peninsula of Peloponnese, that's the southern peninsula of Greece, and the principal city there is Sparta. To the north, we have the city of Athens, the city-state or the polis of Athens. Now at the time, Sparta was the most powerful Greek city-state while the reforms in Athens were going on. And Sparta was becoming kind of hegemonic, and they were threatening the city-states of the north, particularly Athens. So in response to this looming threat from Sparta, Athens turned to Persia for military aid, while Darius was king of Persia from the time 522 to 486 BC. Now recall that this is the Darius under whose kingship the temple, the Jewish temple, was reconstructed in 516 BC. Now, at the time that Athens was seeking assistance from Persia, the two nations actually knew very little about each other. Well, it turns out that Greece was seeking an alliance of equals, but on the other hand, Persia wanted nothing less than complete subjugation of Greece. So Athens is seeing Persia as a nation of equals in terms of might, military might, and Persia is looking for an opportunity now to subjugate the Greek nation. So what happens is that Athens, supported by several Greek city-states, rebelled against Persia, the Persian king, and their influence. So in response, King Darius of Persia sends his army and ships against Athens in 490 BC. The Athens were victorious at a battle of Marathon, as you can see on the map, and then shortly thereafter at Athens. So for a time at least, Greece, under the rule of Athens, the Athenians, were able to hold off this Persian invasion. 10 years later, King Xerxes of Persia invades Greece a second time. This is in 480 BC. And this time a force of 300 Spartans held off the Persians for several days. Now this is the famous Battle of Thermopylae, and you see this in the map too. So the two red stars you see are the two famous or big battles that occurred in 490 and then 480 BC. In the same year, 480 BC, Athens defeated the Persians at Salamis, and Xerxes was forced to withdraw. So this marks a turning point in the nation of Greece. Now, so for the first time, they have really asserted themselves as kind of like a dominant power in their region of the world. So this is a huge event for the nation of Greece. Unfortunately, toward the end of the 5th century BC, Sparta and Athens would engage in an ongoing conflict called the Peloponnesian War. This went on from 431 to 404 BC, so almost 30 years. And this prolonged war had the effect of weakening the entire nation, both militarily and economically, for some period of time. All right, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the nation just to the north of Greece called Macedonia. And we're going to tie all these events together shortly, I promise you. So in the north, in the country of Macedonia, Philip II becomes king of the country in 359 BC and united the nation, transforming it into the most powerful force that the world had ever known. Macedonia had vast forests and minerals, and these resources invited invasions frequently from its neighbors. Unlike Greece, Macedonia lacked a strong middle class to support an army to defend its borders. So King Philip of Macedonia transformed Macedonia from a nation loosely ruled by an aristocratic elite into an economic and military might. And I just want to say here, we're going to get into Alexander the Great shortly. Alexander is the son of Philip, but really, when you look at the origins of the might of Macedonia and how Macedonia, as we will see shortly, transformed the Greek nation, Philip really is the true hero here. He's really the one with insight and vision. So Philip admired the Greek culture And so he invited actors, playwrights, philosophers, and historians to his court from Greece and to Macedonia. And the Greek philosopher Aristotle actually taught Philip's son for a time. So Philip began to build up a strong middle class, and he transformed the army into the most formidable army that had ever existed at the time. And you can see in the picture here, we have the typical Macedonian phalanx formation later adopted by the Greeks. And this was one of the beauties or genius of Philip's transformation of the army. And it was this phalanx formation that was feared by other nations that were taken over or conquered by Macedonia. So in 338 BC, Philip conquered Athens and Thebes. And again, Athens and Thebes are two of the principal city-states or polis in the northern part of Greece. And he established himself as the ruler over a united Greece and Macedonia. And one of the reasons Philip did this is he had enough wisdom and vision to understand that it was just a matter of time before Persia was going to return with an even greater army and navy than they had in 490 and 480 BC. And he knew that a Greek nation that was weakened over time by the Peloponnesian Wars and was still recovering, he knew that the nation of Greece was not in any position to resist a Persian invasion. So he had the wisdom to understand that a united Macedonia and Greece would be able to withstand an invasion from Persia, and he was right. So now we're going to talk about Alexander the Great. So Philip was assassinated in 336 BC, and his son Alexander, whom he had groomed to lead Macedonia, became the leader of the Greek Empire. And as I said, at the time Alexander inherits this combined nation of Macedonia and Greece, the combined nation is already strong military. It's got a strong middle class, it's got a strong army, it's got capable leaders and generals. So I'm not attempting to take anything away from Alexander here, but I just want to give credit where credit is due, and really Alexander really owes much of what he inherited to his father Philip. So Alexander made it his highest priority to spread Greek culture to the known world, and his military conquest took him through Judea, Egypt, Mesopotamia, Persia, and Bactria, which is modern Afghanistan. And Alexander eventually did defeat the Medo-Persian Empire in 331 BC after a series of victorious battles against the forces of Darius III. And this is in fulfillment of a passage in Daniel 8, verses 5 through 7 that I'm going to read to you here. So this is from Daniel. He came to the ram with the two horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him and struck the ram and broke his two horns. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him. And there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Now, you should understand here that the ram in this Daniel passage is a reference to the Persian Empire, or specifically the Medo-Persian Empire. And the horns of the ram, there are two of them, represent Media and Persia, or if you recall, Media and Elam. Elam is the nation that produced Cyrus the Great. So Elam, or Persia, united with the nation of Media over time, they became the Medo-Persian Empire. So this is a vision in the Daniel passage of Alexander conquering the Medo-Persian Empire. Now we're going to talk about the successor kings. This is a time in Greek history when the nation was splintered, fragmented, and ruled by several different concurrent leaders. So Alexander died in Babylon in 323 BC, and he left no successor. Following his death, there arose several leaders from among the ranks of the military and government who emerged as regional leaders, and these came to be known as the successor kings. By 311 BC, there were four successors who ruled over the former Greek Empire. The first was Cassander in Macedonia, the second was Antigonus in Asia, the third was Lysimachus in Thrace, or modern Bulgaria, and the fourth was Ptolemy in Egypt. This was all in fulfillment of a passage in Daniel 8, verse 8. I'm going to read this to you. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead of it there came up four conspicuous horns toward the four winds of heaven. Out of one of them came a little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. So the great horn initially is the Greek Empire, and the four horns that came out are a reference to the four successor kings who ruled the former Greek Empire for a time in different geographical locations. And we're going to focus particularly on this little horn which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, and toward the glorious land. And this is where we're going to start to pull in the nation of Israel. So for a time, each successor king was committed to the spread of Hellenism. However, when any one successor king tried to expand his domain at the expense of another, wars would break out. So here's a map of the successor nations around the year 300 BC. So you can see in the nation of Greece, we have the lands ruled by the Antiochus Empire, that it was simply referred to as the Antiochus Empire. And then in the region of Egypt, we have the Ptolemaic Empire. And then this large brown area you see is the Seleucid Empire. And let's talk about these three empires and see how the political events shaped over time. So concerned over the growing power of Antiochus, and that's this red region we're looking at, Ptolemy in Egypt, aided by a general named Seleucus, defeated Antiochus's army and distributed his land among the other successors. Seleucus defeated Babylon and emerged as a new ruler in his own right that included parts of Asia formerly ruled by Antiochus. It is his empire, the empire of Seleucus, which is the nation described in Daniel 8:8 that grew exceedingly large toward the south, the east, and toward the glorious land. In the meantime, while this is going on, Ptolemy down in Egypt moved into Palestine to expand his empire, and hostilities are going to erupt now between the Seleucid and the Ptolemaic empires, between Seleucus and Ptolemy. And if you look at the map here, we see that Israel, the nation of Israel, is going to be caught right in the center of this conflict. And this is where all the events surrounding the ancient Greek Empire now are going to start to impact the nation of Israel. So let's talk about Israel and Greece. So the Seleucid king Antiochus III, also known as Antiochus the Great, he had a son Antiochus Epiphanes, and the father and son defeated Ptolemy in Egypt, assisted by provisions from the Jewish nation. So we have a time here during Antiochus III, or Antiochus the Great, when there is a more or less friendly relationship between the Greek Empire, or at least the Seleucid Empire, and the nation of Israel. And that's going to change very quickly. So Antiochus the Great went on to subdue Samaria. He was favorably disposed toward the Jewish nation, and noting their piety toward God, provided materials for the Jewish temple. So we see this friendly relationship between the Seleucid Empire and Israel, again for a time. During this time, a conflict erupted in the priesthood between those who wanted to adhere to their Jewish heritage and those who wanted to promote Hellenism. Okay, here is where the seeds of conflict are going to start to be planted. So what's going on here is within the priesthood of Israel, there's a faction that wants to kind of take the nation in a direction toward Hellenism or toward Greek ideas. And then there's another faction within the priesthood that is insisting on, no, we need to adhere to our Jewish heritage. We're a covenant people, and we should be following the law of our covenant. So we have a division going on in the priesthood here, and as we're going to see, the Greek leader Antiochus Epiphanes is going to take advantage of this division within the Jewish priesthood. So after the death of Antiochus the Great, his son Antiochus Epiphanes became ruler of the Seleucid Empire, and he allied himself with the Jews who supported Hellenism. And here we have two figures, Antiochus the Great, or Antiochus III, and his son Antiochus Epiphanes, also known as Antiochus IV Epiphanes. So let's talk about how the events are going to transpire now with the death of Antiochus the Great. So problems occurred within the nation of Israel due to the external influences of the Greek Empire and those within who wanted to embrace Hellenism. The high priest Onias opposed the Hellenization of Israel. Antiochus Epiphanes then removed the priesthood by force from Onias and gave it to his brother Jason, who was of the Hellenistic faction, the faction that supported Greece. Onias and his followers then rebelled against Greece. In 169 BC, Antiochus had overrun Egypt, but under threats from Rome, he retreated back to Syria. So this is actually part of a prophecy that we're going to see in Daniel shortly. What's going on here is Antiochus Epiphanes, the son of Antiochus the Great, took an army with him, started out in Syria. They headed south toward Egypt with the intent of overrunning Egypt. But then Rome comes with a naval fleet and soldiers, and they repelled the invasion of Antiochus from Egypt and drove it back north. And so now Antiochus Epiphanes now is going to take his troops and move northward back to Syria, but on the way they're going to pass through the nation of Israel. So on his return journey, Antiochus passed through Jerusalem, and he killed many who were part of the rebellion against Greece. Now 2 years later, in 167 BC, Antiochus returned to Jerusalem under the pretense of peace, but while he was there, he laid waste to the entire city, sacked the temple of its priestly ornaments, destroyed the books of the law, and he forbade the animal sacrifices. He also slew or slaughtered a pig on the altar, and this is in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 8, verse 11, and you see the verse here in the slide. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown. This all happened under Antiochus Epiphanes. The Maccabees restore Israel. So, I've been talking about the Hasmonean Dynasty, and this is a good opportunity, if you haven't done so, to go to my website, www.theendoftheendtimes.com, and please print out the chart or the figure that shows the Hasmonean and the Herodian dynasties, because that's going to become a very important focal piece of this lesson, and especially when we get to the Roman Empire. So a man named Mattathias, who died in 166 BC, had 5 sons who were known as the Maccabees. He fought against Greece, and he taught his sons to do the same. 3 of them in particular, Judas, Jonathan, and Simon, continued to fight against Greece after the death of their father. Judas Maccabees successfully defeated the generals of Antiochus, and after 3 years' time, the Jews cleansed the temple and rebuilt what had been damaged. The celebration of the rededication of the temple lasted for 8 days and is celebrated to this day by Jews and is known as Hanukkah, or the Festival of Lights. So now we're going to take a look at some rather mysterious Bible prophecies, ones that are widely open to different interpretations. The first one is the 2,300 evenings and mornings. And this is from Daniel chapter 8, verses 13 through 14. I would encourage you to turn your Bible there if you have it. So in Daniel chapter 8, this passage indicates the 4 following events. The daily sacrifice is taken away. There is a transgression leading to desolation. The sanctuary is given over to another people, and the host is trampled underfoot. Let's see if we can make sense out of this. We know that Judas Maccabees defeated the Greek army and restored the sacrifices exactly 3 years to the day after Antiochus slaughtered the pig on the altar, and this would be a period of 1,062 days. So it doesn't quite line up with our 2,300 evenings and mornings, so let's keep looking. Many Bible scholars believe that the 2,300 evenings and mornings actually refers to 1,150 days, as there were 2 daily sacrifices. So Josephus noted that Antiochus held Jerusalem for 3 years and 3 months, which is a period of exactly 1,150 days based on the Jewish lunar calendar of 29.5 days in a month. So I believe that this prophecy, the 2,300 evenings and mornings, is simply a reference to the amount of time that Antiochus is holding Jerusalem. It lines up perfectly. And I just want to comment here, there's been a lot of interpretations, very, very peculiar interpretations, frankly, of this 2,300 evenings and mornings. Some religions or denominations interpret this as a period of 2,300 years, after which time they believe that Christ would return or was going to return, because the 2,300 years would put that future date sometime in the 19th century, around the middle of the 1800s. Well, obviously that prophecy was wrong, and I think this analysis that I have here is a much simpler and more logical explanation of this prophecy in the Daniel 8 passage. Now let's talk about the kings of the north and the south. So this is another kind of mysterious passage from Daniel 11, verses 29 through 32. Let's look at, I'm not going to read the whole passage, it's quite long, but let's look at a couple excerpts from the passage that you see in quotes here. So the quotes are actually taken from the Bible directly. So the first one is, he will invade the south. Well, this is a reference to the attack by Antiochus Epiphanes against Egypt. Ships of the western coastline refer to the Roman naval forces that threatened Antiochus. Next, he will vent his fury against the Holy Covenant. So this is a reference to when Antiochus was repelled by Rome, when he was down in Egypt. He passed through the Holy Land, or through Israel, and while in Jerusalem, he turned his wrath against the Jewish people, especially those who opposed Greece. And in his wrath and fury, then, he laid waste to the city and to the sanctuary. He will abolish the daily sacrifice. Well, this occurred in 167 BC when Antiochus sacked Jerusalem. And then finally, the people who know God will firmly resist him. Indeed, the Maccabees resisted the army of Antiochus and restored the sacrifices, as we saw. So let's wrap this up. So the Jewish intertestament period begins with the Cyrus decree in 537 BC. The Greek classical age began in 500 BC and ended in 323 BC with the death of Alexander the Great. We saw that conflicts between the Jews and the Seleucid Empire arose when certain Jews opposed the influence of Hellenism upon the Jewish nation. Daniel prophesied concerning the rise of Alexander, the successor kings, the desecration of the temple under Antiochus Epiphanes, and the ongoing war between the Ptolemaic and the Seleucid empires. And then finally, the Jewish nation returned to the kingship for a time during the Hasmonean Dynasty. We saw that a little bit in the previous episode during the Persian Empire, and we're going to talk about that again in the next lesson when we talk about the Roman Empire. So thank you for watching this episode, and I hope you join me for part 6 when we talk about the Roman Empire. Thank you.